A surprising moment that revealed lessons on boundaries and respect, a genuine family tale. It was a scorching summer afternoon, and the house felt quieter than usual. I found myself in the kitchen skillfully chopping fruits for a refreshing salad, all while keeping my thoughts engaged. My husband was away, consumed by work that required more of his time than our family did. I had grown accustomed to the long hours and the loneliness that accompanied them, but something about today felt different. My 21-year-old stepson entered. His presence was a wave of youthful energy that seemed to brighten the room. Over the years, I had developed a deep affection for him, considering him a member of my family. However, recently I had begun to observe subtle shifts in his behavior towards me, and it was increasingly difficult to overlook his need for assistance. He asked, his voice casual yet slightly distant. He glanced at the fruits I was placing, then his gaze lingered on me a split second too long. I smiled, handing him a knife. "You can start with a cantaloupe," I said. He nodded and moved closer, standing beside me as he awkwardly began slicing. His hands were steady at first, but as the moments passed, I noticed a slight tremor. At one moment, our hands brushed against each other in his grasp as I extended my hand towards the bowl. He paused, caught in a moment of stillness, then pulled back quickly, muttering an apology. "It's fine," I said lightly, pretending not to notice the awkwardness, but inwardly I couldn't shake the growing awareness of the tension. As we worked, I caught him stealing glances at me, his eyes darting away every time I turned toward him. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet in that moment, there was a pause, a tension that enveloped me, something I had never experienced before. The room seemed to shrink around us, the air heavier. "Resembles walls," I said, breaking the silence and sliding the finished salad onto the table. He nodded, his face slightly flushed as if embarrassed by something he couldn't explain. He lingered for a moment longer, muttering something about needing to make a phone call before leaving the room. There I was, alone, gazing at the vacant doorway, reliving the encounter in my mind. I told myself it was nothing, just a passing moment. Jason was young, probably shy or nervous about something unrelated, but deep down I knew better. His glances, the unintentional brushes, the manner in which his voice trembled, everything seemed intentional, even if he hadn't intended it to. That evening, I sat on the couch waiting for my husband to return. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between Jason and me. It was subtle, like a shadow gliding past just beyond the horizon, yet undeniably present, and it mattered. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't overlook it. The days that followed felt peculiar, as though a veil of invisibility had been cast between us. Jason and the myth of whether we admitted it or not felt its presence lingering in the house with Morphon always ready to hand with various tasks cared for. At first, he thought nothing of it, but soon Becca Meyer's presence wasn't random. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the hallway when Jason walked in. He hadn't said much, just sat on the couch and turned on the TV. I kept working, but I could feel his eyes on me, stealing glances whenever he thought I wasn't looking. It made me uneasy, though I tried to reveal that I had been occupied. After some time, his tone was casual, but his expression was more serious than usual. "Just maintaining." I did not reply in order to wing his gaze. He remained silent. The silence stretched out longer than it should have. Finally, I looked up, his eyes locked onto mine. There was a meaning in his expression, a curious amalgamation, or perhaps something even deeper. "What is that?" Left moon settled. Later that week, I decided to spend some time by the pool, hoping to cool my mind. I wasn't expecting company. However, Jason did not show up for long after declaring he required a respite from his duties. He tossed his towel onto a chair and leaped into the water. With a hint of hesitation, I remained on my lounge chair, pretending to be engrossed in a book. But when he emerged from the pool, water cascading from his hair, my focus shifted entirely. I couldn't help but glance up. He caught me looking, and for a brief moment, either he looked away or didn't. "Get in," he asked, his voice light but his eyes heavy with meaning. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm fine here." He swam closer to the edge, resting his arms at the side of the pool, his gaze on me in a way that felt far too intimate. I felt the heat rise within, not from the sun but from the tension that existed between us. "You've been quiet lately," he remarked, his voice gentler now. I shrugged, trying to deflect. "Just feeling tired, I suppose." I chose not to press on, yet the force with which he looked at me unmistakably conveyed that he was not convinced by my response. Eventually, he emerged from the pool, towel in hand, drying off as he strolled by. As the water droplets cascaded onto the hot pavement, a rush of excitement surged through me. In the stillness moments after he left, I sat there replaying everything in my mind. I couldn't deny that it was merely a painting, something I wasn't prepared to speak in front of. The way he gazed at me, the way he hung around me, it was no longer innocent, it was intentional, and the anticipation lingered. It was impossible to overlook as it lay in the stillness of the night, enveloping the house. It was quiet as I made my way to the kitchen, seeking some water to clear my mind. The air felt heavy around me, not only from the sweltering summer heat, but also from the mounting tension that had been simmering over the past few weeks. I was taken aback to find Jason there, shirtless and guiding. The counter was cluttered as he rummaged through the fridge. "You're up late," I said, attempting to sound casual, though my voice revealed my nervousness. "I couldn't sleep," he replied without looking. He closed the fridge and turned around, his eyes locking onto mine. Something in his expression made my breath catch, a blend of fragility and courage I hadn't seen before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence that enveloped us spoke volumes, resonating with unspoken words of purpose or action waiting to be expressed. The anticipation was palpable. "Oh," his gaze, the way his eyes lingered, not on the glass in my hand but on me. Evie, with a tone that wavered, seemed to be searching for the right moment to ask me something. His hesitation was palpable. I tilted my head, trying to play it off as nothing. "What's that?" He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Have you ever experienced that sense of not fitting in, as if you're out of place in your surroundings?" The inquiry took me by surprise. I searched his face for how to answer. "What do you mean?" He spoke, his voice gentle and reminiscent, as if intended for another time, leaving you feeling as though you were ensnared in a life that doesn't quite suit you. I was at a loss for words. The honesty in his words, the way they mirrored feelings I buried deep inside, left me shaken. Before I could formulate a response, he moved in closer once more, near enough that I could sense the warmth of his presence. "Jason," I started, but he cut me off. "I realize this is wrong," he admitted, his voice quivering with urgency. "I understand that I shouldn't feel this way, yet I can't help it. I've tried, but I just can't." I found myself staring at him, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Sarah, we can't hear it, but it's there," I murmured softly. He remained still. Did it turn his gaze? I reflected on the moments we've shared together. I strive to resist, yet I find myself unable to. "For you encompass everything I perceive." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. I wanted to tell him to stop, to leave, to pretend this conversation had never occurred, yet I chose not to. I couldn't. When he reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against my arm, it burned like an inferno. I ought to have stepped back, ought to have expressed that this was unfeasible. Instead, I stood frozen, illuminating the moment's expansion into something greater. It shouldn't have been. Then, his lips brushed against mine, hesitantly at first, but soon the kiss grew more intense. It was charged with intensity, all-consuming and completely misguided. I recoiled suddenly, tears welling in my eyes. "This cannot happen," I spoke, my voice trembling, not pausing for his reply. I turned and exited the room, leaving him there in a profound silence. That next morning was unbearable. The atmosphere surrounding us was heavy with unspoken words, inscribed but unspoken. I averted my gaze from Jason, focusing instead on mundane tasks, hoping to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. As he stepped into the room, the air seemed to shift, and I could sense the intensity of his presence enveloping me. During breakfast, he sat opposite me, unusually silent. My husband rambled on about work, completely unaware of the tension simmering between Jason and me. During the audit, feigning interest, yet I found myself in another realm, reliving the kiss repeatedly. After my husband departed for work, Jason lingered in the living room. I sought to evade him, but when I walked past, he called out gently, like in our conversations. I stood still, my breath caught in my throat. I realized that I couldn't escape this conversation indefinitely without saying something. I turned and took a seat, perched on the edge of the couch, maintaining a careful distance. Apologies escaped his lips, his voice heavy with remorse. I never should have. I never intended to complicate things for you. I shook my head, my hands resting gently in my lap. Jason, what transpired last night cannot occur once more. We have crossed the boundary. I know, he said, leaning forward. I know it's wrong, but I can't pretend I don't feel the way I do. You mean more to me than anyone else ever has. His words pierced through me like a sharp blade. If I wanted to convey my desire for him to cease all contact, I would firmly express that he should completely leave me be. Yet the earnestness in his voice rendered it unavoidable. This isn't very well expressed, at last my voice quivered. Not Tom, not to you, and certainly not to your father. He recoiled at the mention of his father, but he didn't back down. I can't help how I feel, he expressed, his voice barely a whisper. I know you feel something too. Do not say that you do not. The weight of truth lingered heavily in the space between us. It was impossible to ignore it any longer. I had sensed something I couldn't explain or justify, but that didn't make it right. What we feel doesn't matter, I declared with conviction, even as my voice trembled. We must release our hold, Jason. We can't do this to him. He gazed at me, a blend of anguish and resolve in his eyes. I don't want to hurt him, I said, but I can't pretend this isn't a trial. You're the only one who has ever made me feel this way. Before I could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment. My husband was home early. Jason and I exchanged a panicked glance and quickly stood up, retreating to his room without another word. As I observed him fade into the distance of the hallway, an unnameable weight settled in my chest. Lines had been blurred, the boundaries broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. My heart was caught in a tumultuous struggle, weighed down by guilt, tethered to loyalty, and shadowed by an unnamed longing. For the first time, I found myself uncertain about my next move.